Hi, this is Stuart Weems and welcome to the Investopoly podcast. My goal is to give you simple, easy to understand strategies, insights and tips to help you master the game of building wealth. And in this episode, I'd like to take you through a few charts and data to sort of unpack to some degree how COVID has impacted certain industries and individuals within the economy. And I think what this data does is it helps to inform us how quickly we are likely to see a recovery and where is that recovery likely to occur, initially at least. A lot of these charts were taken from a presentation that Governor Lowe, the Governor of the Reserve Bank of Australia, gave in October, so last month. Of course, it's going to be difficult a little bit to share some charts with you on a podcast, but perhaps I can sort of describe what the chart looks like and what the outcome is. Of course, I would encourage you to check out the charts that are in the link is in the show notes to the podcast, but also the blog on our website. So the first chart that Governor Lowe shared was how the unemployment rate or I guess job losses occurred by age. And what it showed is that half of the people that are still out of work till August, so the data is a little bit old, half of them are under the age of 34. And in fact then the increments over 34, the unemployment distribution is relatively even. And it's been well publicised that COVID has really disproportionately affected younger people. The next chart, what they did is had a look at sort of occupational earnings, so average rates of earnings by occupation, and then they ordered them from high to low and split them into 5 groups, so sort of represented, the bottom 20% of earners, then the next 20%, and so forth. And then they looked at the impacts of unemployment based on income, and what this showed us was that the people that earn or in the bottom 40% of earnings had 80% of the job losses. So it's younger people and people that are earning lower incomes that have been more severely affected. And that makes sense because a lot of those occupations can't work from home. So if you're a cleaner, for example, or you work in hospitality, you can't do that work from home. Interestingly, the top 20% of earnings, actually employment increased in that sector. So certainly what COVID is doing is it's making, to some degree, the rich richer and the poor poorer. And the next chart, the next sort of most interesting chart was by industry. So where is the unemployment centred in what industry? It'll be no surprise that hospitality is way out there. And I think hospitality as an industry is going to need a lot of help, a lot of government support. And it's likely that hospitality as an industry is going to really struggle in terms of returning back to pre-COVID levels, and it could take many years. Manufacturing, professionals and transport, arts and recreation were the other 4 categories that were impacted. And then really, except for public administration and finance, those 2 industries actually experienced an increase in employment. The other industries have been well and truly sort of protected. In the charts, what it shows is the impact to May and then the impact to August. So really we're looking from, say, March to May and then March to August. And what it does show is that there's been a significant improvement in unemployment, or I should say in employment, to be positive, during May and August. And there's nothing that we would know about today that would suggest that improvement hasn't continued, particularly in states other than Victoria, although Victoria is going to probably bounce back relatively quickly too, post the second lockdown. The next charts, again prepared by the RBA, were some that sort of highlighted of the people that haven't been impacted, or at least impacted to a lesser extent as a result of COVID, and now we know those people are likely to be 35 years or older and likely to earn higher incomes. So for that cohort, what has been happening, what have they been doing with their money. And the first chart that explains that the savings ratio has gone from what was about 5% up to nearly about 20%. So, I mean, part of that's going to be because of the lockdowns through COVID. Things have been shut, no overseas travel. We've been shut in our homes, particularly in Melbourne, so we've had less items to spend on. But what it's suggesting is that we've got more money in the bank. Consumption's fallen away significantly, but again, that's probably more in relation to lockdown. And we've seen spending data, which I'm going to talk about in a second, bounce back relatively quickly. And there's been an uptick in disposable income. Part of that would be just the reduction in interest rates, but the savings ratio is probably the most compelling one. The next chart I wanted to show, and that Government Low in fact showed, was repayments towards personal credit cards. And they have really skyrocketed. So it certainly demonstrates that people have been spending less and then probably kind of repaying their past spending habits or overspending in the past if they've got credit card balances. And the last chart from Government Low that I wanted to talk about was probably arguably one of the most interesting ones, because I haven't seen it before, or at least this data. And what it showed is the amount of money people are spending on interest, the amount of principal they're repaying off their home loans, and the most interesting portion is the amount they have in offset accounts. And what it shows is that the cohort that haven't been impacted by COVID, or at least to a much lesser extent, they've been repaying loans, particularly personal debt and credit cards, and also mortgages at a faster rate. And they've got substantially more, almost twice as much money in the offset accounts. So it's showing that to some degree, this cohort that hasn't been impacted are actually in a much stronger position than what they were pre-COVID. The next set of charts are put together by the banks, and most of the banks look at spending data. And what they do is typically every fortnight, not all of them, but a lot of them, they release some economic data around credit card spending in terms of what states are spending what, in which categories, and those sorts of things. And it gives us some real-time sort of measure of how people are feeling and what they're spending and where they're not spending and so forth. So it's quite valuable data and very timely, most importantly. And essentially it shows that spending is about 8, it depends on which bank you look at, 8 to 10 or so % higher than what we were spending last year. And so part of that's going to be we're spending on different things, and obviously we're all spending it in Australia because we can't travel outside of Australia. But it shows that what I think it shows is that the cohort that haven't been impacted by COVID have enough spending power, enough spending capacity to more than offset the reduction by the people that unfortunately have been impacted by COVID. And we must understand that consumer spending makes up around about 60% of GDP in Australia, so it's a pretty important aspect. Westpac and the Melbourne Institute released their Consumer Sentiment Index last week, and it was kind of surprising. Consumer sentiment is now at a 7-year high. Pretty significant, I guess. The contributing factors to that is the fact that Australia is almost relatively COVID-free now. Particularly Melbourne hasn't had a case for a long time, so that probably helps people look further afield, beyond COVID, kind of after COVID, if you like, and certainly into 2021, where we're going to probably have a more normalised economic level of economic activity. And also Pfizer's announcement in regards to their successful vaccine, or likely successful vaccine. And so if we get that in the first half of next year, that's obviously going to assist with the global economic outlook. And I think these factors are contributing to some degree to overall confidence and sentiment. So what does all this data tell us? Well, The first sort of story behind the data, I guess, is that higher income earners are probably going to drive the property market recovery, which I've sort of talked about previously, but this data really confirms it. So, of course, that first cohort of people that have been impacted by COVID are typically the people less than 34 years of age in the lower 40% of earnings. They're probably not owning or contemplating purchasing property in blue chip suburbs. Not to sound elitist or anything like that, but the reality is because of their borrowing capacity, purchasing power, affordability, they're probably not contemplating owning property in those locations. Whereas the second cohort, which is the people that haven't been impacted by COVID, that have been putting more money in the bank, they've pretty much preserved their income levels, they've been repaying debts, they're actually in a substantially stronger financial position today than they were pre-COVID. They're the people that are probably likely to make the first move, to start re-implementing previous plans, whether it was to upgrade, downgrade, buy their first property, invest, those sorts of things. They're probably the first cohort to make a move, and I think those people will really drive probably the recovery of the property market. The second key observation, is that we're also going to be reliant upon those higher income earners to drive Australia's economic recovery. And as I said, consumer consumption, I should say, contributes around 60% to GDP. So if we've got these people spending lots of money, and particularly since they can't go overseas and spend money there, they're going to be forced to spend money in Australia, whether that's on increased consumption or just domestic travel and tourism. Either way, the money stays inside Australia. And hopefully at a macro level, at a total level, that more than makes up for the people that have been unfortunately severely impacted by COVID from an economic perspective. Now, of course, there will be industries and sectors that will be hard hit and will take many years to recover. And again, the Melbourne hospitality scene is probably right at the pointy end of that. So, of course, I'm not suggesting that, it's all good. Tomorrow we're back to where we needed to be. But really from a macro level, which is important because they're the sorts of things that drive markets and returns and overall sentiment as well. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we start feeling more confident, we tend to start putting our plans into action. And so when everyone sees other people putting their plans into action, they get confidence and it snowballs like that. So there you go. There's some really interesting data, really interesting insights. I would encourage you to have a look at the actual charts because a picture tells 1,000 words. And I think we can be relatively optimistic if we're property investors and share investors. I think we can be relatively optimistic about certainly Australia's economic prospects and ability to recover from COVID and for those asset classes to start delivering the types of returns that we hoped that they would deliver when we first invested in them. So, as I said, check out those charts on the website, and until next week, bye for now.